What if the gods we worship were never gods at all? What if they were men, just like us, thrown out of time, forced to survive in worlds that could never understand them? And what if I told you I was one of them? I don't remember the explosion, just the sound, a low, rolling hum that swallowed everything. 1 second, I was in the desert with my unit, scanning the horizon through night vision. The next, I was floating, weightless, blind, and alone. When I opened my eyes, the sand beneath me was colder, denser. The stars above weren't the same. I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe I was dead. But then I saw them, figures on horseback, their bodies painted in ash and clay, their eyes wide with fear. I reached for my rifle. It was gone. My helmet, my gear, all stripped away. Only the dog tags remained. That's when I realized something was wrong with the world itself. They captured me that night, dragged me through the dunes, tied my hands, spoke in a language that felt like broken echoes of something ancient. I didn't understand their words, but I understood their fear. To them, I wasn't a man. I was a ghost from the sky. Days later, they brought me to her, the queen, the woman whose eyes burned with both sorrow and command. Her crown wasn't gold. It was bone and iron. Her soldiers knelt when she passed, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to understand how the hell I'd gone from 21st century warfare to the dawn of civilization. She asked me who I was. I told her the truth. I'm a soldier from a place that doesn't exist yet. She didn't flinch, didn't laugh. She simply said, "Then perhaps, soldier, you're exactly what my kingdom needs." That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't dead. I wasn't dreaming. I'd been given a second war, one I never wanted, in a world that had never heard of mercy. And this is how I became the ghost that built an empire. When I first woke in that desert, the air was thick with the smell of burnt stone and something ancient, something alive. The sky was bruised violet, and the wind carried a whisper that sounded like voices. It wasn't like any desert I'd known. The dunes breathed, shifting as if the land itself were watching. My throat was dry enough to crack. My tongue felt like paper. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. The pain in my ribs told me I'd fallen from somewhere high. Maybe the blast had thrown me miles. Maybe the world had ended, and I was all that was left. The first human sound I heard was a scream. Raw, sharp, close. Instinct kicked in. I rolled behind a dune, heart pounding. From the crest, I saw them. 3 riders closing in, their spears reflecting the dawn. Their faces were painted in black and red stripes. They moved with a kind of rhythm, like they'd done this hunt 100 times before. I had no weapon, no comms, no plan. Only my hands, and the training drilled into my spine. When the first rider reached me, I ducked under his spear, grabbed the shaft, and yanked him down. He hit the sand with a sound like a bag of wet meat. I didn't want to kill him, but when his friend charged, I had no choice. I turned his own spear against him. It went through his chest clean, the way it does in the manuals. Efficient, controlled. That was when I realized I wasn't in a war zone anymore. I was in history. The third rider didn't attack. He stared at me, trembling, then shouted something guttural before galloping away. His cry echoed across the dunes. I remember thinking, he's calling for help. Within hours they came, dozens of them. Warriors, men with curved swords, women carrying nets and hooks. They threw me down, tied me to a wooden frame, and dragged me toward a distant fire. The tribe's camp was like something out of a forgotten age. Mud huts, fire pits, crude banners made of animal hide. Children stared as I passed. Old women whispered and touched their foreheads. Some spat, others bowed. When they brought me before their chieftain, I was barely conscious. A man in wolf pelts stepped forward, his beard plaited with bones. He shouted and the crowd roared back. Then I heard a softer voice, a woman's. She stepped out from the shadows, holding a torch. Her skin was bronzed by the sun, her eyes like dark honey. She wore no crown, only a simple band of leather. Her gaze locked on me, steady and sharp. The crowd went silent when she spoke. I couldn't understand her words, but her tone was calm, commanding. The chieftain argued, angry, jabbing his finger at me. She turned to him and said something that made even him bow his head. Later I learned her name was Arenya, daughter of the chieftain, priestess of the old gods. They didn't kill me. Instead, they tied me to a pole near the edge of camp. She came to me that night. The torchlight trembled on her face as she studied the dog tags around my neck. Aric, she said, reading the letters slowly, as if tasting them. Aric. Her accent carved my name into something ancient. She pointed to my uniform, to the flag patch, then at the sky. From the sky? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Her lips parted in awe. She touched her chest, then pointed toward the horizon. Queen, she said. Then to herself, messenger. That was how it began. Over the next few days, I learned fragments of their language, just enough to understand that they believed I'd fallen from the realm of the gods. The tribe followed the queen of the two rivers, a ruler trying to unite the scattered clans of a dying land. Arenya was her emissary. When they decided to bring me to the capital, I didn't resist. What else could I do? Every sunrise here looked wrong, every constellation foreign. The moon was bigger, the air heavier, even gravity felt different, as if the planet itself hadn't settled yet. We traveled for days along cracked riverbeds and cliffs that shimmered like glass. I saw animals that didn't belong to any fossil record, massive, silent, and slow. At night, I dreamed of my unit. Johnson, Davis, Lee, the way they screamed when the blast hit, the way the world folded in on itself, like paper burning from the edges. On the fifth night, Arenya sat beside me by the fire. She handed me a bowl of something that smelled like herbs and salt. You fight like thunder, she said slowly, but your eyes, you hate war. I looked into the flames. You're right, I said. I've had enough of it to last 2 lifetimes. She tilted her head, curious. 2? Yeah, I said with a half smile. Guess I'm on my second one now. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She placed her hand over her heart, a silent gesture of respect. When we reached the Queen's stronghold, I finally saw civilization, or what passed for it then. Tall stone towers surrounded by wooden walls, soldiers drilling in the dirt, smoke rising from blacksmith pits. It wasn't primitive, it was evolving. You could feel it, like the heartbeat of something new. The people stared as I was led through the gates, some through petals, others through stones. The whispers followed me, the man from the sky, the omen of fire. At the palace steps, Arenya stopped and looked back at me. Do not speak, she warned. Only kneel. I don't kneel, I said automatically. Her eyes softened, but she didn't argue. She turned toward the great hall and spoke in a clear voice that carried across the courtyard. The doors opened, spilling golden light. And there, standing against the glow, was the queen. She was younger than I expected, her posture straight, her gaze fierce. Around her neck hung a medallion shaped like 2 rivers crossing. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. Her first words were measured, slow, translated through Arenya. You are the stranger who fell from the heavens. Speak truth and live. Speak lies and die. My voice cracked as I answered, My name is Aric. I am not a god. I'm a soldier from a future you can't imagine. The hall went still. Every breath hung in the air. The queen stepped closer, her eyes flickering with something between disbelief and wonder. Finally, she said, Then perhaps, soldier, the gods sent you because they no longer trust men. And that was how my war began. Again. They brought me into the Queen's Hall like a prisoner who didn't know he was already part of the legend. The walls were carved with scenes of old wars. Chariots, beasts, gods with spears made of light. The air smelled of smoke and sweet resin. 1,000 eyes watched me from behind the columns, and somewhere above, drums beat slowly, like the pulse of the earth itself. The queen stood on a dais, neither adorned nor fragile. Her crown was a band of hammered bronze, her cloak black as volcanic glass. Her presence was absolute. You didn't see her, you felt her. When she spoke, the entire room leaned forward. Arenya translated for me in broken English. Her Majesty asked why the sky has sent you. What purpose do you bring? I hesitated. Survival, I said. Yours and mine. Murmurs rippled through the court. The queen raised her hand, silencing them. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, curious. Not the eyes of a ruler expecting miracles, but of a strategist testing a weapon. She circled me slowly, studying my stance, the scars, the patch on my torn sleeve. You are not of our kind, she said through Arenya. No, I admitted. Then you may see what our kind has become. And just like that, I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was an observer, an unarmed ghost in the midst of an empire trying to breathe. The capital, called Edrin, was magnificent in its decay. Towers leaned like tired giants. The people looked both proud and afraid. 2 rivers cut through the city, one silver, one dark red from the clay. The queen's rule was young, fragile, challenged by rival warlords who claimed divine right. At night, the sound of drums echoed from across the river. Rebellion brewed in the dark. I watched her court fall apart in slow motion, counselors plotting, priests whispering about omens. Her soldiers fought like wolves but had no discipline. They were brave, but bravery without order is just chaos with a heartbeat. I couldn't help it. My instincts took over. One morning during the guards' training, I saw them forming a crude line for archery, shoulders uneven, stances wide. I stepped in, uninvited. The moment I corrected one man's posture, the commander barked and shoved me back. Reflex made me twist his wrist, flip him over the sand, and pin him before I realized what I'd done. The courtyard froze. The queen had been watching. She dismissed the guards with a flick of her hand and approached me. You fight differently, she said. Where I come from, we train for unity. No man fights alone. Unity, she repeated the word carefully, tasting it. We have many words for war, none for unity. That was the day she gave me an impossible order. You will teach my soldiers how to fight as one. The first weeks were hell. Language barriers, distrust. The men saw me as a cursed omen, a stranger who carried no weapon yet spoke like a commander. They mocked my commands, imitated my walk. I didn't blame them. You can't teach centuries of instinct in a single moon. But war is a universal language. I drew diagrams in the sand, arrows, angles, choke points. I demonstrated flanking maneuvers, shield formations, hand signals. They called it witchcraft. Then they tried it, and won their first skirmish against a raiding band twice their size. That changed everything. Soon the queen herself came to watch the drills. She stood by the ramparts, her cloak fluttering in the wind, eyes narrowed in concentration. Arenya stayed near me, translating when she could, but sometimes the queen didn't need words. She understood through observation alone. She had that kind of intelligence. The kind that doesn't ask for explanation. It dissects you silently. After one successful exercise, she descended from the balcony and approached me, her voice low. These tactics, are they gifts from your gods? No, I said. They're from men who learned the hard way. And yet your world is still at war. I looked at her, because we never learned when to stop. For a long moment she said nothing. Then almost softly, perhaps you were sent here to teach us when to begin. Weeks turned into months. The soldiers began calling me Aric of the Fire. They'd never seen organized combat like ours. Drills that turned panic into rhythm. When I barked a command, hundreds of voices answered in unison. But something else was changing. Something dangerous. The Queen started visiting the training fields more often. Sometimes she asked questions about my world. Other times she simply watched, her expression unreadable. Once, during a storm, she joined me under a half-collapsed pavilion. Rain turned the earth into steam. Lightning clawed at the mountains beyond. "Tell me," she said, "what is the greatest weapon your people have?" I hesitated, thinking of guns, drones, bombs, none of which could exist here. "Our greatest weapon," I said finally, "is fear. We learned how to use it better than anyone." She nodded slowly, eyes distant. "Then perhaps our greatest weapon will be faith. But faith is fragile when men start dying." The first real battle came sooner than I expected. A rival warlord, Tarek of the Ash Plains, marched on the capital with 5,000 men. The Queen's army was half that. Her council urged her to surrender, to marry Tarek and unify through bloodline. She refused. Instead, she turned to me. "You say you fight for unity. Prove it." We met the enemy at dawn, where the silver and red rivers crossed. The mist was thick, the ground trembling under hooves. My heart pounded, not with fear, but memory. The sound of war always triggers ghosts. I ordered the front line to tighten formation, spears locked, shields overlapped. I positioned archers on the ridge, told them to wait for my signal. When the enemy charged, I waited until they were almost close enough to smell the iron. Then I whispered, "Now." The first volley struck like thunder. Horses screamed. Men fell. My soldiers didn't scatter. They held. For the first time, they fought not as individuals, but as one body, one will. The battle raged for hours. I saw men I'd trained die in front of me, and still they didn't break. When the dust settled, the Queen's banner still stood. Tarek's forces retreated, broken and bleeding. Victory, but not triumph. That night, the Queen walked among the dead. No guards, no entourage, just her and me. "You call this unity?" she asked quietly. "It's a start," I said. She stared at the horizon. "You've given me victory, but at what cost?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. She turned to me, her expression softer now. "In your world, Aric of the Fire, does peace ever come?" I thought of home, of drones in the night sky, the endless desert wars. I swallowed the truth. "Sometimes," I lied. She smiled sadly. "Then perhaps it is our turn to try." That night, as the fires burned low, I watched her standing alone beside the river. The reflection of twin moons shimmered around her. She looked less like a ruler, more like a human trying to hold together a crumbling dream. And I realized something that terrified me more than any war. I wasn't just fighting for her kingdom anymore. I was fighting for her. There's a moment in every war when men stop fighting for orders and start fighting for belief. That was the first thing I tried to teach them. The Queen granted me command of a small division. 200 men, the misfits and the condemned. Soldiers who had failed their captains, thieves given a chance to redeem themselves through blood. They looked at me like I was cursed. In a way, I was. We trained outside the city walls where the desert met the river delta. The mornings were cool. By noon, the heat boiled the sand beneath our feet. I drove them until they vomited, collapsed, cursed my name. I didn't care. I'd seen enough soldiers die from comfort. I used the only tools I had: sticks, stones, and discipline. "Formation is your shield," I told them, drawing lines in the sand. "The man beside you is your armor. You break, he dies." They didn't understand the words at first, but they understood the tone. Pain is a language older than any dialect. By the end of the first week, they hated me. By the end of the second, they feared me. By the third, they began to listen. Arenya translated orders when she could, but eventually the men started to imitate my words. Short, clipped, rhythmical. The drills became chant-like. When one man stumbled, another lifted him. When a shield dropped, the next man covered the gap. It was primitive, imperfect, and yet it worked. We became something new. The queen visited often. She stood on the ridge overlooking the camp, her silhouette framed by the sun. She never interrupted, just watched. One evening when the men were resting, she approached me. "You build warriors out of the broken," she said. "Those are the only kind worth building," I answered. She smiled faintly. "In my world, broken things are hidden. In mine, they're reforged." She studied me a long while, then asked, "What broke you, Aric?" I looked at the horizon. A war that didn't end when it should have. She didn't ask more. She just said quietly, "Then perhaps this is your ending." Weeks turned into months. My men learned to move as one body. I gave them new tactics, signal flares made from resin, formations shaped like an arrowhead, rotating shield walls. They named the technique the breath of fire. But not everyone was pleased. The Queen's High Council began to whisper. Old generals resented my influence. Priests claimed my methods offended the gods. Rumors spread that I'd bewitched the Queen, that I was using her army for my own power. One night, a counselor named Morvek came to my quarters. His robes smelled of incense and fear. "The Queen trusts you too much," he said, "but trust is a knife. Eventually, it cuts both ways." I didn't answer. He smiled, thin and cruel. "You teach her men how to fight. But tell me, soldier, what happens when she no longer needs you?" He left a dagger on my table before walking out. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. 2 days later, the Queen summoned me to her chambers. She stood by the balcony, staring out over the river. The wind tangled her hair, loosened the braids she always wore in public. "The council fears you," she said without turning. "I noticed. They think you'll replace me." I laughed bitterly. "I've had enough of crowns." "Then what do you want, Aric of the Fire?" Her question caught me off guard. For the first time, I didn't have an answer. "I want," I paused, "to stop losing the people I fight for." She turned then, eyes soft yet unreadable. "Then don't fight for me," she said. "Fight with me." It wasn't an order. It was an offer. The next months forged more than soldiers. They forged loyalty. The men began painting red streaks on their armor, a symbol of the rivers and the blood we'd sworn to defend. They called themselves the Queen's Flame. We tested new tactics in real battles, small skirmishes, border raids, ambushes in canyons where sound vanished into the wind. We didn't just win, we terrified. Word spread that the Queen commanded an army that moved like a single creature, silent and unstoppable. But war feeds on glory, and glory always invites hunger. One night, a scout returned from the north with news. Tarek, the warlord we'd once defeated, had united 3 clans. He marched south again, not for conquest this time, but for vengeance. The Queen called a council. The room burned with arguments. Some urged diplomacy, others wanted to abandon the capital and regroup. I stood silent until she looked to me. "Well?" she asked. "If we run now," I said, "he'll hunt us to the ends of the desert. But if we stand and break him here, his men will scatter forever. Then how do we win when he has twice our number? We make them think they've already lost." That night we built fires across the valley, hundreds of them, stretching miles into the dark. I'd used the same trick in my old life, illusion of scale, fear as a weapon. When Tarek's scouts returned to his camp, they spoke of an army so vast it filled the horizon. By dawn, half his men had deserted. By the second day, the rest surrendered without a fight. The Queen stood beside me as the sun rose over the valley of unlit fires. "You fight with shadows," she said. "Sometimes shadows save lives," I replied. She turned to me. And sometimes they consume the light. Her voice trembled slightly. The first time I'd heard fear in it. Not fear of the enemy, but of what I was teaching her. That night we didn't celebrate. The men rested, the fires died. I stayed awake by the river, staring at the reflection of the moons. Arenya joined me, silent. "You've changed her," she said quietly, "and she's changing you." I didn't answer. The truth was, she was right. I could feel it. The pull between duty and something far more dangerous. The queen had become more than a commander to me, more than a ruler. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear her voice saying, "Fight with me." And for the first time in either of my lives, I wanted to. I first heard the sound of iron being born in this world on a night when the air tasted of storm. The blacksmiths were pounding bronze in the forges outside the capital. Soft metal that bent too easily, broke too often. I watched one blade shatter during a routine drill, snapping clean through a soldier's hand. The scream that followed stuck in my mind like shrapnel. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how fragile everything here was. Armor, weapons, even the idea of survival. A single misstep, and everything we'd built could crumble back into dust. The next morning, I asked the queen for something unthinkable. "I need your forges," I said. "All of them." Her expression didn't change. "For what?" "To build something your enemies don't believe can exist." She studied me. "You mean new weapons?" "I mean better ones," I corrected. "Weapons that last." Her eyes narrowed. "The priest will say you defy the gods." "Then they'll have to learn the gods don't swing swords," I said. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then softly, "Very well, but if your creations turn against me, Aric of the fire, I'll see them melted over your grave." The first forge I stepped into was a pit of chaos. Smoke thick as fog, bellows wheezing, men shouting over the roar of flames. They smelted bronze and copper in open pits, hammering by rhythm, not precision. I set to work like a man possessed. I didn't have the luxury of machines or electricity, only memory and instinct. I sketched out crude blast furnaces, designed bellows that could reach higher temperatures. The blacksmiths stared as I ordered them to mix iron ore with charcoal and crushed limestone, the recipe for steel that no one in this era had ever heard of. The first attempts failed. The metal cracked, warped, melted unevenly. The queen visited once, saw the mess, and simply said, "You chase ghosts." "I'm chasing survival," I told her. Weeks passed. Then one night it happened. The forges glowed white-hot, the air so thick with heat it felt alive. When the final ingot cooled, I struck it with my hammer. The sound was clean, pure, like music. The blacksmith beside me looked up, eyes wide. "It sings," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "That's how you know it's real." We called it steel, though the word meant nothing to them. To me, it meant everything. When I showed the queen, she held the blade in her hands, testing the balance. "It's heavier," she said. "It's stronger," I replied. "It'll outlast bronze by generations." She nodded, half in awe, half in fear. "What you've made, it will change war itself." "That's the point," I said. Her gaze hardened. "And what happens when war changes faster than we can control it?" I didn't have an answer. The new weapons spread through the ranks like wildfire. Soldiers trained with the steel blades until their hands bled. They began to win battles faster, cleaner, colder. No hesitation, no mercy. But power has a scent, and it attracts predators. One evening, a group of priests came to the forge, led by Morvek, the same counselor who had once warned me that trust was a knife. "You meddle with divine fire," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "Only the gods forge stars from stone. You make yourself their equal." "I make tools," I replied. "Nothing more." He raised his staff toward the molten pit. then burn in your own fire." Before I could move, he thrust the staff into the crucible. The liquid metal splashed, screaming like thunder. The nearest blacksmith fell, his arm engulfed in flame. Chaos erupted. I dragged the man out, but his skin was gone. When the queen arrived, her face was unreadable. "Who did this?" she demanded. I didn't answer. Morvex stepped forward, his voice steady. "He did, Majesty. He brings us cursed metal that defies the god's law." The queen's eyes moved between us. "The god's law?" she said coldly. "Or yours?" She turned to the crowd. "I saw this man's fire turn weak bronze into strength. You call it blasphemy. I call it evolution." Her words silenced them. Morvex bowed stiffly, but his eyes, before he turned away, promised vengeance. That night the queen visited the forge again. The fires had burned low. I was sitting in the dirt, hands black with soot. She stood beside me, silent for a long time before speaking. "In 1 year," she said, "my people have gone from bronze to steel, from fear to fire. What will they become in 10? "Alive," I said simply. She knelt beside me, her voice softening. "And you, Aric? What will you become?" I looked at the flames. "Maybe just a memory they'll never believe." She reached out then, slow, hesitant, and brushed her fingers over the burn marks on my hands. "Every god this world has ever worshipped was once a man," she whispered. For the first time, I didn't feel like one. Weeks later, the queen presented the new weapons before her army. Blades gleamed in the sunlight like rivers of silver. The crowd chanted her name, but their eyes flickered toward me, the stranger who had taught their world to sing in metal. And then something strange happened. The priests began collecting pieces of my failed experiments, broken shards of steel, and carving symbols onto them. They told the people these fragments carried divine power. The Sky General's blessing, they called it. In their fear, they had made me a god. The queen warned me. They worship what they do not understand. One day they'll destroy it. I looked at her, the torchlight reflecting in her eyes. "Then let's give them something worth believing in before that happens." She smiled. "A small, quiet thing. You still think like a soldier." "I only know how to survive," I said. But survival, I was learning, always demands sacrifice. The next morning, word reached us. Morvex had fled the capital with a dozen loyalists, taking a cache of steel weapons. He was headed for the mountains, toward the rival kingdom of Aric. I stared at the horizon, where dust rose like smoke. The queen's voice was calm, but I heard the fury beneath. "He means to sell your knowledge to our enemies." "Then we can't let him reach them," I said. She turned to me, her face hardening into command. "Then go, Aric of the Fire. Find him. Bring him back." Her tone was sharp, but her eyes betrayed something else. Fear, perhaps. Not of losing a war, of losing me. I bowed, the first time I ever did. And as I rode into the desert that night, the steel at my side humming softly with the wind, I realized what I had truly created. Not just weapons, not just war, but a future, one that wasn't ready for itself. We caught Morvex's trail at dawn. The desert stretched endless ahead, flat, red, quiet, like a wound that refused to heal. My squad rode with me, 12 men I trusted with my life, each one carrying the new steel blades we'd forged. The Queen's Flame, my first and last family in this world. We rode for 2 days without rest. The sun peeled our skin raw. The sand burned through our boots. Then on the 3rd morning, we found the bodies, half buried in the dunes, their armor still shining faintly with the mark of the Queen. My heart sank when I saw one of the faces. It was Orin, the boy who'd once told me he joined the army to make his mother proud. He'd been 17, maybe younger. I clenched my fists so tight my nails broke the skin. The sand drank the blood, silent and merciless. Arenya dismounted beside me. She'd insisted on coming, her bow slung across her back. "They were ambushed," she said softly. "No," I replied. "They were betrayed." We followed the trail of broken shields until the ground changed color, from red to black, from sand to ash. Ahead, smoke curled into the horizon. The ruins of an outpost smoldered. Morvek's men had joined Tarek's army. For the first time, I realized the danger wasn't just betrayal, it was infection. The enemy now wielded our steel. That night, I called a halt. We made camp in the shadow of a rock formation shaped like a hand rising from the earth. The men were silent, afraid to sleep. The air hummed with tension, the way it does before a storm or a slaughter. Arenya sat beside me, sharpening her blade. "You blame yourself," she said. "I taught them how to kill better," I answered. "Now the wrong side's learning faster." She paused, eyes glinting in the firelight. "Knowledge is never wrong. Only those who use it." I looked at her. "You sound like her." A small smile touched her lips. "Maybe she sounds like me." We sat in silence after that, listening to the wind whisper over the sand. Somewhere out there, men were preparing to use my inventions to burn the world that had adopted me. I couldn't let that happen. By dawn, we reached the Valley of Bones, a narrow gorge where old wars had been fought long before either of us existed. The ground was littered with rusted weapons and half-buried skulls. It felt cursed, and maybe it was. We found Morvek there. He stood among Tarek's men, his robes torn, his face thin but defiant. Behind him, hundreds of soldiers, armed with steel, watched us approach. When he saw me, he smiled. "You see, soldier, your gift spreads faster than faith. You've already changed the world. You just don't like what it's become." I drew my sword. "Come back with me, Morvek. You'll face the Queen's judgment." He laughed. "Her judgment? Or yours?" He lifted one of the new blades, glinting in the sun. "You gave us the power of gods, and now you're shocked we use it?" He shouted something in his language, and the enemy surged forward. The valley erupted in chaos. The sound of steel against steel was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Bronze had a dull ring. Steel sang like lightning. It didn't clash. It screamed. We fought in tight formation, the way I trained them. Every breath a command, every heartbeat a step. But for every man we cut down, two more took his place. Arenya fought beside me, swift and precise. Her arrows found throats before I even saw the targets. But then, in the dust and heat, I saw it. One of Tarek's captains wearing the Queen's emblem. My emblem. A stolen banner, taken from one of my dead men. Rage took me. I charged. I remember little of what followed. Just the blur of motion, the weight of the sword, the taste of iron and sand. When it ended, the valley was a graveyard again. Morvek was dying, pinned under a fallen horse. Blood bubbled at his lips. I knelt beside him. "You could have built something," I said quietly. He coughed a laugh. "I did. I built truth." "What truth?" "That men like you will always build the tools of their own destruction." Then he died, still smiling. We returned to the capital, broken and silent. The Queen met us at the gates herself. She said nothing as I laid the captured blades before her feet. Her eyes flickered to the dried blood on my hands. "Yours?" she asked. "Some," I said. She dismissed the soldiers, keeping only me and Arenya. When the hall was empty, she spoke, softly, dangerously. "I told you this fire would consume us." "It was necessary," I said. "Without steel, we'd be dead already." She stepped closer. "And now we live surrounded by it. Tell me, Aric, when will you be satisfied? When every man holds the power to kill 1,000 others?" I met her gaze. "When no man needs to." Her expression broke for the first time. Grief, fear, maybe love. I couldn't tell. She turned away, her voice trembling. "You've given me victory, but not peace. You've given me power but not rest. If this is the cost of your world, I want none of it. I should have stayed silent. Instead, I said, "You can't go back to bronze, Your Majesty. Not after this." She looked over her shoulder, eyes sharp as the blades we'd made. "Then you'll live long enough to watch what your iron does to our souls." That night, the city celebrated victory. Drums, torches, chants, the illusion of triumph. But from the tower, I saw the darker truth. The soldiers parading with my weapons like trophies, children playing at war in the streets, priests blessing the blades they'd once condemned. Arinya joined me on the balcony. "You saved them," she said quietly. "For now," I replied. "You speak as if it's a curse, because it is." I stared at the horizon where lightning danced in the clouds. Somewhere beyond that line was the next war, already forming. I could feel it, history rearranging itself around a new center. She placed her hand on mine. "You fight too hard for a world that may never deserve you." I shook my head. "No one deserves to be saved. We just try anyway." The queen appeared behind us, silent as shadow. She wore no crown, no armor, only a simple white robe. "You leave at dawn," she said. "West of the river. There's unrest in the borderlands. I need you there." It wasn't a request. It was exile disguised as duty. I nodded slowly. "Yes, Majesty." As she turned to leave, she paused. Her voice softened, barely a whisper. "When you look at the fire you've made, do you ever see yourself in it?" I didn't answer, because I already did. Every night. That was the last time I saw her before the fall. And by the time the sun rose over the capital the next morning, the first flames of civil war had already begun to crawl across the horizon. The western frontier was a graveyard of forgotten gods. I'd traveled for 7 days through wastelands where the wind carried no scent of life, just dust and the whisper of things long dead. The Queen's flame rode beside me, fewer now, quieter. We no longer sang before battle. The men spoke in murmurs, and even laughter had begun to sound like mourning. The further west we went, the stranger the land became. Massive stone pillars jutted out of the sand, half buried, carved with symbols that no one could read. The locals called them the teeth of heaven. To me, they looked like something man-made, engineered, not worshipped. One night while scouting ahead, I found it. A sinkhole had opened at the base of a cliff, revealing a spiral of black stairs descending into darkness. The air that came from below wasn't just cold. It hummed, faintly, like the static before a storm. I should have turned back. Instead, I called Arenya and 2 soldiers. We lit torches and went down. The stairs spiraled for what felt like hours. The deeper we went, the less the torches mattered. The walls began to glow faintly, streaked with veins of metal I couldn't identify. I ran my hand over one, smooth, seamless, cold as liquid steel. "This is no tomb," I said quietly. Arenya frowned. "Then what is it?" "Something older than kings," I whispered. "Maybe older than men." When we reached the bottom, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The floor was covered in dust, but the ceiling, if it could be called that, was made of panels that shimmered faintly when we moved. In the center stood a pedestal, smooth as glass, pulsing faintly with light. The soldiers hesitated. Arenya stepped forward. "What is this place?" "I don't know," I said. "But I think, I've seen it before." That was the truth. Something deep in my memory stirred. An image of similar structures I'd seen during military briefings back home. Archaeological anomalies. Impossible ruins. Sites buried in deserts all over the world. But they were supposed to be thousands of years younger than this. I wiped away the dust on the pedestal and found markings. Circles, lines, intersections. Not writing. Schematics. Beneath the symbols was a slot, the shape of a rectangle. I reached instinctively for my dog tags. My fingers brushed against the small metallic chip that had once stored my mission data. It was the exact same shape. The idea hit me like lightning. No, it couldn't be. Arenya watched me, alarmed. Aric! I inserted the chip. The chamber came alive. Light surged across the walls like veins awakening after sleep. The floor trembled. And then a voice, not from any mouth, but from the air itself, spoke in English. Temporal breach confirmed. Operator identity match. Captain Aric Nolan. Mission status. Failure. Debrief initiated. The soldiers fell to their knees, covering their ears. Arenya froze, eyes wide with terror. I couldn't breathe. The voice continued. Chronofield displacement, unplanned, estimated relocation, 9,300 years pre-mission epoch. Probability of causal loop, 84%. My heart stopped. I had gone back, not by accident, but by design. Someone, somewhere in my own time, had sent me here. And whatever had caused the explosion that day, it wasn't a malfunction, it was an experiment. The lights dimmed. A holographic projection shimmered above the pedestal, a translucent map of this land. The rivers, the mountains. The Queen's kingdom glowed at the center. Then the image shifted forward. Rivers bending, kingdoms crumbling, cities rising. The map accelerated through time until the shape resembled the continents I knew. It was Earth. Arenya whispered. Is this your world? I stared at the map. It's everyone's. The projection flickered again, and a final message appeared. Directive, ensure human survival post-cataclysm through temporal seeding. You are not the first. Then the light died. For a long time, none of us spoke. Only the sound of wind echoed faintly through the tunnel. Arenya was the first to move. Aric, what does it mean? I sat down, staring at my hands. It means I wasn't sent here to change history. I was sent here to make it. She knelt beside me, her expression unreadable. Then your gods are real. I shook my head slowly. No, just men. Men who thought they could play gods. She touched the wall, tracing the faint light still fading in the metal. And now you are one of them. Her words hit harder than she knew. When we emerged from the ruins, the night sky felt heavier. The stars above looked different now, less like wonders, more like witnesses. The men didn't speak of what they'd seen. I ordered them to seal the entrance. No one comes here again, I said. Not until we understand what it means. But secrets are heavier than stone, and in this world, everything that's buried eventually surfaces. 2 weeks later, we returned to the capital. I expected questions, maybe even punishment for disobedience. Instead, we arrived to find the city quiet. Too quiet. The Queen met me in the throne hall. Her eyes were darker, colder. You were gone too long, she said. The priests whispered that you found new gods beneath the earth. They're wrong, I said. What I found was the truth. Truth, she repeated, tasting the word. You speak it as if it's a weapon. Sometimes it is. I told her everything. About the chamber, the voice, the mission. Her face didn't change until I spoke the last line. You are not the first. Then she whispered, then how many of you have come before? I don't know. She stepped down from the dais. You've given me iron, war, and now this, knowledge that eats at the soul. What else will you bring me, soldier of tomorrow? I wanted to tell her I hadn't brought anything, that I'd only ever tried to survive, but that would have been a lie. Because I had brought something, the end of her world's innocence. That night I stood on the balcony overlooking the rivers. The reflection of the twin moons shimmered like two open eyes staring back. Arenya joined me, silent. You shouldn't have told her, she said softly. The truth changes nothing but hearts. Then maybe it's time hearts change too, I replied. She shook her head. No, you've given them too much change already. I turned to her. And if this world was always meant to burn? What if I'm just the match? She looked at me then, not with anger, not with fear, but with something close to pity. Then may the gods forgive the fire, she said. That was the night the queen stopped praying to the old gods, and the night I stopped pretending I wasn't one of them. Rebellion never begins with a sword. It begins with a whisper. At first it was faint, the kind of rumor you could brush off like smoke, that the man from the sky had found the god's tomb, that he'd spoken with voices of thunder and lightning, that the queen herself had knelt before him in secret. By the time we realized how fast it was spreading, it was too late. The city had turned to murmurs and shadows. Priests stood in the markets, holding up shards of steel like relics, declaring that the queen had betrayed the divine, that I, the stranger, had poisoned her mind and led the people astray. Fear does not need proof. It only needs repetition. I remember the night the first riots began, smoke rising from the lower quarter, bells clanging across the towers. The soldiers were shouting, running through the streets, trying to control the chaos, but the chaos had already taken root. When I reached the palace gates, the guards blocked my way, my own men. "Orders from the council," one of them said, avoiding my eyes. "What orders?" I asked. "You are to be held for questioning, until sunrise." I could have fought them, but I saw their hands trembling. These were men I'd trained, men who chanted my name on the battlefield. Now they couldn't even look at me. Arenya appeared then, breathless, bow in hand. "They've turned the council against her," she said. "They mean to take the throne tonight." "Where's the queen?" I asked. "In the temple," she said, "praying for a god who may no longer exist." The temple stood on a hill above the capital, its dome catching moonlight like a crown of glass. I found her there, alone before the altar, hands clasped, the air thick with incense and dread. "You shouldn't be here," she said without looking at me. "Neither should you," I answered. "The city's burning." "I know," she whispered. "They call me a heretic. They call you worse." I stepped closer. "We can still stop this." She turned then, her eyes red but steady. "Can we? You gave them fire, Aric. They've decided to burn with it." I wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that we could still rebuild. But before I could speak, the doors burst open. A dozen soldiers stormed in, led by General Careth, one of my own captains. His armor was blackened, his expression cold. "By order of the council," he said, "you, Aric of the Fire, are to be taken into custody. The queen will be escorted to the council chamber for judgment." The queen's voice was calm. "Judgment from whom?" "Men who tremble at their own shadows." Careth didn't answer. He looked at me. "Don't resist. Don't make this worse." I saw it in his eyes then. Fear mixed with pity. The same look I'd seen on 1,000 faces before a firing line. "I trained you better than this," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's what I'm afraid of." When they moved to seize me, Arenya acted first. Her arrow took down the nearest guard. The second, she struck through the throat. Before the others could react, I grabbed Careth's sword and swung. The temple erupted into chaos. The clash of steel, the echo of screams. The queen stood motionless amid the storm, her white robe catching flecks of blood. When the last guard fell, she whispered, "You've just declared war on your own army." "No," I said. "They declared war on you." We fled through the lower tunnels beneath the palace, passages carved centuries ago, back when kings still feared assassins instead of their own people. The torches flickered against the damp walls as we ran. The queen said nothing for a long time. Then as we neared the outer gates, she asked, "Do you regret coming here?" I hesitated. "Every day," I said, "and none of them." She stopped, looked at me, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "Then you are more honest than most gods." By dawn, we reached the outskirts of the city, Behind us, smoke curled into the sky, turning gold in the rising sun. The capital, the heart of her empire, was now a wound. We found refuge in an abandoned fortress by the cliffs. The Queen's flame regrouped there. What was left of them? Barely 100. The rest had either fallen or turned against us. Arenya walked among the wounded, silent, her hands trembling as she stitched wounds that refused to close. When she finally came to me, her face was pale. "They've crowned another ruler," she said. "Kareth leads them now. The priests call him the Hand of the Gods." The Queen closed her eyes, then whispered, "Then the gods have dirty hands." That night she summoned me to the watchtower. The wind howled through the cracks, carrying the distant echo of drums from the city. She stood facing the horizon, her cloak snapping like a banner. "When I was a child," she said, "I dreamed of uniting the rivers. My mother said I was foolish, that the rivers would rather drown each other than merge." "They'll merge," I said quietly. "You'll see." She turned, her eyes meeting mine. "And when they do, will they drown you with them?" "I'll take that risk." She stepped closer, her voice low, trembling. "Why?" "Because I've already drowned once," I said. Something broke in her then. She leaned in, her forehead against mine, her breath shaking. "If I lose this war, promise me one thing." "Anything. Don't let them turn what you built into something monstrous." I wanted to promise. I couldn't. The truth was, it was already too late. 2 days later, they found us. The traitors came at dawn, hundreds of them, led by Kareth himself. The Queen's flame fought like demons, but they were outnumbered. I held the line until my arms went numb, until the air filled with the smell of blood and fire. Arenya screamed my name once before she disappeared into the smoke. I found the Queen on the ramparts, her sword broken, her crown gone. "We can still escape," I shouted. She shook her head. "No, this is where the rivers meet." She pressed something into my hand, a small fragment of steel, carved with the same symbol from the underground chamber. "Find the truth," she said, "and if I fall, make sure the story doesn't." Before I could stop her, she turned toward the battlefield, raised her blade, and charged into the chaos. The last thing I saw was her silhouette swallowed by the fire. When the battle ended, the fortress was ash. The Queen was gone, and the world I tried to save had learned how to destroy itself. Exile has no sound at first, only silence, the kind that hums in your chest like an old wound. We wandered for weeks across the wastelands, what was left of us. 30 men, 2 horses, one purpose, to disappear. The Queen was gone, and with her, the only reason these men had to fight. But they followed me still, perhaps out of loyalty, perhaps out of habit. Soldiers don't know how to stop marching, not until the ground takes them. The desert grew colder each night, the stars sharper. It was there, in that endless nowhere, that I began to dream again. Not of home, but of her. I'd wake to the sound of her voice calling my name, and for a moment I'd believe she was alive. But dawn always made liars of dreams. We found shelter in a canyon where the river once ran, now dry and cracked. The cliffs were streaked with old iron ore, red veins glowing faintly in the twilight. I turned the canyon into a camp. We built fires from thornwood, melted metal from scavenged weapons, and began again. I trained the survivors not as soldiers, but as shadows, scouts, saboteurs, ghosts of the war that refused to die. Arenya returned to me one night. She'd been gone since the battle, presumed dead. When she appeared, cloaked in dust and blood, I almost didn't believe it was her. "I followed Kareth's army," she said. "He's declared himself emperor of the 2 rivers." My chest tightened. "And the Queen?" She looked down. "There are no remains." It should have been closure. Instead, it was a void. Over the months that followed, whispers began to reach us. stories of famine, of rebellion turning inward. Kareth ruled with iron and fear, but the people had learned too well from me. They remembered tactics, formation, discipline, the tools I'd given them, and now they used them against each other. I'd taught them unity through conflict, and they'd learned division through power. History, it seemed, was a circle, and I was its center. One night, while staring into the forge fire, Arenya sat beside me. "You can still leave," she said. "Find another place, another time." I smiled bitterly. "You think I haven't tried?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" I reached into my pack and pulled out the data chip, the one I'd found in the ruins. It had cracked during the battle, the metal bent, the circuitry dead. "It's useless now," I said. "Even if I could fix it, I don't know what would happen. Maybe nothing, maybe everything." She stared at the flickering light. "So this is your prison?" "This," I said, gesturing to the fire, "the weapons, the scars. This is everyone's prison. We just decorate the walls differently." She placed her hand over mine. "Then let's make something worth being trapped in." The following spring, refugees began to find us. Farmers, soldiers, even former enemies. They came broken, hungry, desperate for purpose. I gave them one. We built walls of stone, forged new weapons, planted crops in the canyon floor. We became a rumor, the Ghost Kingdom, a haven for those who'd lost everything. They called me Sky General now, though I never asked for the name. In their eyes, I wasn't a man anymore. I was an idea, and ideas, I'd learned, are harder to kill than people. A year passed before the first scout returned from the north. "Kareth marches," he said, 10,000 strong. He means to end what you began." I stood for a long while, staring at the horizon. "Then it's time we finished it." The final preparations took weeks. We reforged the last of the steel into new blades, lighter, sharper. Arenya crafted arrows tipped with fragments from the old ruins, metal that hummed faintly in the dark. "This isn't just war," she said as she worked. "It's prophecy now." "I don't believe in prophecy," I said. "Maybe not," she replied, "but it believes in you." The night before battle, the camp was silent. No songs, no laughter, only the sound of wind moving through the canyon, the breath of ghosts. Arenya found me by the riverbed, where the water used to flow. "If we lose tomorrow," she said, "promise me you'll leave." "I can't," I told her. "If I run, the story ends with them calling me a coward. If I stay, maybe it ends with meaning." She looked at me, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. "Meaning doesn't keep you alive." "No," I said, "but it keeps me human." When dawn came, the horizon burned red. Kareth's army spread across the plains like a tide of steel. The air trembled with drums. I stood atop the cliff, looking down at the force I'd once trained. Rows of shields, perfect formations, discipline born from my own lessons. I'd built them to protect. Now they marched to destroy. Arenya climbed up beside me. "If we die here, what then?" "Then maybe history learns to forget us," I said. She smiled faintly. "Or maybe it never will." The battle began at noon. Our archers loosed the first volley, a storm of black arrows whistling through the sky. The impact tore through Kareth's front lines, but his men didn't falter. They advanced like a machine, my machine. The clash was thunder. The sky went dark with smoke and dust. Every swing of my sword felt heavier, as if the air itself resisted. In the chaos, I found Kareth. He stood on a rise of stone, his armor gleaming, his eyes burning with fanatic fire. "You gave us this gift," he shouted, "and now you'll die by it." He charged. Our swords met with a sound like a scream. Steel on steel, two futures colliding. He was strong, disciplined, but rage made him predictable. I let him exhaust himself step by step until his guard broke. My blade found his heart. As he fell, he whispered, You were never a savior, Aric, just another myth waiting to bleed. I held him until the light left his eyes. When the dust cleared, the plain was silent. Smoke rose in pillars. Thousands lay dead. Victory meant nothing. Arenya found me kneeling beside the body of Kareth. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice breaking. "It's over," she said. I shook my head. "It'll never be over." She looked out at the horizon, where the setting sun turned the battlefield gold. "Then let this be our last war." I turned to her, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe it might be. That night the storm came, a real one. Rain fell for the first time in months, washing the blood from the earth. Thunder rolled across the canyon like a heartbeat. I stood beneath it, unarmored, unguarded, feeling the sky collapse into itself. The water ran cold over my hands, cleansing them, or pretending to. The fire still burned in the distance. The world was changing again. But maybe finally it was ready to be reborn. There's a moment before every great war when the air forgets how to move. The world holds its breath, waiting to see who will break the silence first. That morning the sky split open. Two suns rose, one real, one reflection, mirrored against the clouds like a wound in time. The soldiers called it an omen. I knew better. It was the same light I'd seen the day I vanished from my world. The same storm that had swallowed my life whole. Time, it seemed, had come full circle. We stood on the plains of Serath, a wasteland of dust and bone. The last remnants of Kareth's empire gathered on one side, what remained of my ghost kingdom on the other. Two armies, both exhausted, both led by ghosts. Arenya rode beside me, her bow slung low, her expression carved from calm. The rain from the storm had dried into a thin crust of salt across her armor. "They're not fighting for power anymore," she said quietly. "They're fighting because they don't know how to stop." "Then we'll teach them," I said. Her gaze shifted to the twin suns above. "And if time ends today, then maybe it was always meant to." The enemy banners rippled in the heat. I saw their commander, a boy barely 20, wearing armor too large for him. The future eats its young, I thought. I rode forward alone, stopping halfway between the armies. The silence was unbearable. Every soldier's breath felt like thunder. "I am Aric of the Fire," I shouted. My voice carried farther than I expected. "We've bled enough for ghosts and gods. Lay down your arms, and this ends now." No one moved. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe they would listen. Then a single arrow broke the stillness. It grazed my cheek and buried itself in the dirt. The second sun flickered above, and the world went mad. When the battle began, it wasn't just war. It was collapse. The light from the twin suns pulsed, distorting everything. Time, sound, even motion. I saw soldiers frozen mid-strike, then suddenly aged to dust. Others moved faster than possible, their bodies blurring through the fight. Reality fractured, and I realized the device buried beneath this world, the one that had brought me here, was activating again. The temporal field. It wasn't a weapon, it was a reset. I shouted for Arenya over the chaos. "The chamber, it's waking up." She cut down an enemy and spun toward me. "Then shut it down." "I can't," I said. "Not alone." "Then don't die trying." Her words barely reached me before the ground exploded. A surge of blue light tearing through the battlefield like lightning. Men vanished in an instant, their armor falling empty. The two suns above flared brighter, merging until the sky turned white. I fought my way toward the epicenter, a crater forming in the heart of the plains, pulsing with impossible energy. The air shimmered. The sound was like 1,000 voices whispering in reverse. And there, standing in the eye of the storm, was a figure, the queen, alive. She wore no crown, no armor, just the same white robe she died in, untouched, unstained. Her eyes glowed faintly with the same light that burned in the sky. I stumbled forward, disbelief clawing at my throat. How? Her voice echoed, layered, both near and impossibly distant. You call me back, Aric. Or maybe I never left. This isn't real, I said. Your history never dies, she interrupted. It just waits to be remembered. The energy around her pulsed again, stronger. The machine beneath this land, it feeds on moments. It's rebuilding the past. Then it'll destroy everything, I said. She smiled sadly. Everything must be destroyed before it can be made new. Arenya appeared behind me. Blood streaked across her face. She stared at the queen, her voice breaking. What is she? The end, I said. And the beginning. The queen's eyes flickered toward Arenya. You were loyal, even in grief. For that, the world owes you peace. Arenya raised her bow. I don't want peace. She loosed an arrow, straight through the queen's chest. It passed through as though through light. The queen didn't flinch. You can't kill what's already become time, she whispered. Then the ground split open. The battlefield collapsed into chaos. Rivers of light tore through the soil. The soldiers fled, swallowed by the storm. Arenya fell to her knees, clutching her head. Aric, what's happening? She's merging it all, I said. Past, present, future. She's folding them into one. How do we stop it? I looked at the fragment of steel the queen had given me long ago. It vibrated in my hand, resonating with the pulse of the machine. By giving it what it wants, I said. I ran toward the queen as the world shattered around me. Memories flickered in flashes. My old life, my comrades, the explosion, the moment I fell through time. Every step felt like walking through the folds of my own existence. When I reached her, she looked at me with infinite calm. You understand now, she said. Yes, I whispered. It wasn't fate. It was a loop. She nodded. Then break it. I pressed the fragment into her palm. The moment our hands touched, the world screamed. Light engulfed everything, pure, endless. For an instant, I saw everything at once. The rise of her kingdom, the fall of my world, the birth of fire, the first breath of civilization. It all led here, to this. Then I saw her face, not the queen, not Arenya, but all the lives this world had ever remembered, merging into one truth, humanity's endless, desperate need to begin again. When the light faded, I was standing on a beach. The sky was gray, the air heavy with salt. My armor was gone. The rivers were gone. The world was new, untouched, unscarred. I looked down. In the sand lay the fragment of steel, now dull, lifeless, and beside it, a voice recorder. Military issue, scarred but functional. My old one, the same I'd carried on my final mission. I picked it up, pressed play. My own voice echoed from the speaker. Mission log. Captain Aric Nolan. Temporal breach confirmed. If anyone hears this, we are the architects of our own beginning. I laughed, the kind of hollow laugh that belongs to the damned and the divine. The waves washed over my boots. I looked toward the horizon, where a new sun was rising, just one this time. Maybe it meant something. Maybe not, but I started walking, because that's what soldiers do when the war ends. They keep moving, even when time itself runs out. When I first saw the river again, I thought I was dreaming. Its surface was too still, too clean. No ashes, no blood, no ghosts, just water, calm and endless, gliding over stones that had never known war. I followed it for miles, barefoot, my uniform torn to threads. The air was thick with silence, not the silence of death, but of rebirth, the kind that hums with possibility. I didn't know where I was. Maybe the same world, maybe another, maybe the first. But the sun, the one true sun, warmed my face, And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a weapon. I felt like a man. Days blurred into one another. I built a shelter near the water, hunted, listened, waited. No soldiers, no queen, no arena. At night I stared at the stars, old friends that refused to answer. Sometimes I'd see flickers in the distance, faint pulses of light in the sky, echoes maybe of what I'd undone. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I heard her voice in the river's flow. Make sure the story doesn't die. I spoke to her anyway, to both of them, to all of them, because silence was heavier than grief. Weeks passed before I found the others. They appeared on the horizon one morning, a caravan of wanderers, ragged, sunburned, carrying children and fire in their eyes. They spoke no language I recognized, but they carried tools, baskets, and stone blades. The woman leading them had a scar across her temple, the shape of a crescent moon. When she saw me, she froze. Then slowly, she bowed. "Sky Man," she said, the words crude, broken, but familiar. I laughed quietly. No, not anymore. Still, they followed me to the river. I showed them where to find fish, how to dig trenches for water, how to use fire to harden clay. They watched my every move as though learning from a ghost. And maybe they were. Months later, a settlement took shape. Small huts of wood and stone, smoke rising from cook fires, children laughing in the mud. I taught them to forge, though not steel, not yet. Just tools, nails, knives. Enough to build, not to destroy. At night, they gather around the fire and ask questions in their halting words. Where did I come from? Why did I fall from the sky? I told them stories, not truths, not lies, just echoes. About a queen who ruled the rivers. About a woman who could split the sky with an arrow. About a world that forgot what peace looked like, and a soldier who tried to remind it. They listened as if it were scripture, and slowly I realized, maybe it was. One evening, the river flooded. The current swept through the camp, fast and wild. The villagers panicked, grabbing what they could. I ran into the torrent, helping them pull children to safety, hauling logs, shouting orders. By morning, the storm had passed. The water receded. The camp was half gone, but the people lived. When the sun rose, the woman with the scar approached me. She knelt, then held up a stone tablet she'd carved during the night. It was crude, but I recognized the symbol immediately. Two rivers crossing, the Queen's emblem. She looked up at me, smiling. For her, she said, something broke in my chest, quietly, beautifully. I took the stone in my hands, feeling its weight. For her, I whispered. Years passed. Seasons came and went, like soldiers on rotation. My hair turned white. My hands trembled when I forged. The village grew. Fields spread along the riverbank. The people learned faster than I could teach. They stopped needing me. That was the point all along. Sometimes strangers would come from the far plains, carrying stories of a man who fell from the sky and brought the gift of fire. They called him many names. The maker, the wanderer, the first teacher. I didn't correct them. Names are just the dust that stories leave behind. The day I decided to leave, the sky burned red. Not with war, but with sunset. The river shimmered gold, bending west like a road. I walked alone until the trees grew thin and the sand returned. The same kind of desert where I'd first opened my eyes centuries ago, or maybe yesterday. I found a hill overlooking the river's curve and sat there until the stars came. I took the recorder from my satchel, the same one I'd found on the beach after the storm. It was nearly dead, but it still blinked with a faint red light. I pressed record, the sound of wind, a voice rough, older. Mission log. I don't know what day it is anymore, or year. If anyone ever finds this, I hope you understand that we didn't come here to conquer. We came because we broke the world we had. We wanted to fix it. But maybe the world was never meant to be fixed. Just learn from a pause, the sound of the river. There was a queen once. She believed unity could save her people. There was a woman who taught me how to see peace in the middle of fire. They're both gone now, but their echoes remain in every hand that builds, in every voice that remembers. Soft laughter. If time really is a circle, maybe we'll meet again. Maybe every age begins with the same mistake and the same hope. A long silence. Then softly. My name is Aric Nolan. I was a soldier. I was a teacher. And maybe, just maybe, I was the reason the world began. Click. The recorder stops. I buried it by the river, beneath a cairn of flat stones. The current whispered as if approving. The sky turned pale, the first light of dawn rising. For a moment I thought I saw her, the queen, standing on the opposite bank, her white robe trailing in the water. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply raised her hand in farewell. Then she was gone, and the river moved on. I stood, breathed the new world's air, and felt something I hadn't in lifetimes. Peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop fighting what must be. They say the gods once walked among men. Maybe they were just soldiers, lost in time. And maybe every civilization begins the same way, with someone who didn't belong, trying to make sense of a world that wasn't ready for him. As the river carried the sun's reflection away, I whispered one last truth. History isn't written by the victors. It's written by the survivors. And then I walked into the light. They say the river remembers, that every drop carries a story, every current a whisper of the lives it's seen pass. If you listen closely, when the wind is still and the world is half asleep, you can hear it, the story of the Sky General, of a man who fell from the stars, carrying nothing but fire, grief, and the memory of a world long gone. Centuries later, the river runs through a kingdom that no one can trace on any modern map. Its ruins are older than the pyramids, older than the first words ever carved in stone. But the symbols remain, two rivers crossing, etched into walls that still hum faintly when lightning strikes. Archaeologists argue over its origin. Some call it the first civilization, others call it coincidence. But deep beneath the dust, buried under layers of forgotten time, they always find the same thing. Iron that shouldn't exist, forged too early, too perfect, too modern. And among the relics, sometimes they find the same words carved again and again in a language no one can translate. Only two letters that somehow survived the erosion of meaning, A-N. The legends say he was a god of fire who refused to be worshipped, that he taught men to fight together, to build, to dream, that he vanished the day two suns burned the sky. In the stories, the queen still waits for him at the edge of time, guarding the gate where the rivers meet. Her soul became the current that guides the world forward, never still, never silent. They say that when a soldier dies with honor, the queen carries his spirit to the other shore, where the Sky General waits to light his path. Children play by the riverbank and toss stones into the water, each one a wish for courage. The old women tell them, "He'll hear you if your heart is true." But there are other versions too, darker ones. In the forbidden texts of the desert monks, he isn't a savior, he's a warning. A man who brought forbidden knowledge, who played with time, and nearly broke creation itself. They call him the first machine, the spark that began the endless wheel of war. Yet even those who curse his name still use his inventions, still live in the shadow of his gift, because that's what humanity does. It curses its teachers and builds temples on their graves. Somewhere, in a museum no one visits, there's a display case holding a rusted metal fragment. It's small, unremarkable, shaped like a river split in two. Next to it lies a recovered military dog tag, its letters barely legible, Nolan, Aric, U.S. Marines. The plaque below it reads, Origin unknown. Estimated age, 9,000 years. Most people walk past without noticing, but sometimes, on quiet afternoons, the case flickers, just once, as if catching a light that isn't there. And the river keeps flowing, through ages and empires, through every hand that learns to build, through every eye that dares to look up at the stars and wonder, where did it all begin? Maybe it began with a soldier who fell from the sky, or maybe it began with the first person who looked at war and decided there had to be something more. Soft, distant voice. Aric's faint, echoing through time. If you ever hear this, remember that peace isn't born, it's built. And it's built by those who've seen enough destruction to crave something gentler. If I was ever more than a soldier, it was only because I finally learned how to stop fighting. The river glimmers under the last light of dusk. The wind moves like breath over the ruins. For a moment, just a heartbeat, a figure stands on the bank, tall, weathered, his shadow stretching long across the water. Then the wind shifts, and he's gone. Only the whisper remains, carried downstream into the dark. Every ending is just a beginning that forgot its name.